Well, clearly I was upset yesterday, and everyone could see that. It was a personal issue, and I'm not going to go into the details of that. But my job as Chancellor at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday is to be at PMQs next to the Prime Minister, supporting the government, and that's what I try to do. Is this job easy? Is it easy to turn around the economy? No, it's not. It is tough, but I'm getting on with that job, and I think people are beginning to see the results. And during the course of this Parliament, I'm determined to do more to improve living standards for work.
All right, here's a plot twist you don't see every day in Westminster. The government has actually listened to people and backed down. I know. Check the calendar, make sure we haven't slipped into some parallel universe. But it's true. After days of mounting pressure, furious campaigners and rebellious MPs sharpening their pitchforks, the government has pulled its controversial amendment to the Hillsborough Law that would have given intelligence chiefs the power to decide when they fancied being transparent. Shocking development, really. It turns out that when you propose legislation meant to force officials to tell the truth and then immediately create a loophole big enough to hide MI5's entire filing cabinet, people get a bit annoyed. Who knew? Right, quick favor before we dive into this beautiful mess. If you're enjoying watching the government perform yet another screeching handbrake turn, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Over 94% of you are watching without subscribing. It's completely free, takes literally 1 second, and it genuinely helps us keep tracking these political U-turns as they happen. Cheers if you did. Now, let's get into why Westminster just witnessed what might be the fastest government climb down since, well, last month probably. So, let's set the scene, because this story has been brewing like a particularly volatile pot of political tea. The Hillsborough Law, officially called the Public Office Accountability Bill, is supposed to be this landmark piece of legislation that fundamentally rewrites the relationship between the state and the public. The core idea is brilliantly simple. When things go catastrophically wrong, public officials and contractors have to tell the truth. Revolutionary concept in British politics, I know. This law exists because of the Hillsborough disaster back in 1989, where 97 Liverpool fans died at a football match, and the authorities spent the next 3 decades lying, smearing, and covering up what actually happened. The families fought an absolutely brutal battle for justice, taking on the police, the media, the establishment, everyone. Their victory was meant to ensure no other families would ever have to endure that same nightmare of institutional dishonesty and stonewalling. Fast forward to now, and Sir Keir Starmer pledged during the general election to introduce this duty of candour. Big promise, loads of fanfare, very moving speeches about transparency and accountability. So when the bill finally arrived, everyone expected it to have teeth. What they got instead was legislation that looked good on paper until you spotted the bit about the security services. Because on Wednesday, the government proposed amendments that brought spies within the scope of the law, which sounds great until you read the fine print, subject to the approval of the head of their service. That's right, MI5 and MI6 would be covered by the transparency law, but only when their own bosses decided they fancied being transparent that particular day. It's like installing a burglar alarm that only goes off if the burglar thinks it's appropriate. Campaigners absolutely lost their minds, and rightfully so. They argued, quite reasonably, that this would allow those running the security services to decide whether to disclose information, which completely defeats the entire bloody purpose of having a duty of candour in the first place. The whole point is that officials don't get to decide when the truth is convenient. Truth isn't a buffet where you pick and choose the bits you like. It's the whole meal, even the bits that give you indigestion. But here's where it gets properly interesting. The government didn't just face angry campaigners and grieving families. They faced rebellion from within their own ranks, from proper Labour heavyweights. Steve Rotherham, the Liverpool City Region Mayor, and Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, came out swinging over the weekend. These aren't backbench troublemakers or opposition pot stirrers. These are senior Labour figures with massive personal authority on this exact issue. Burnham especially has been championing Hillsborough families for years. When he says your amendment risks undermining the spirit of the legislation and creates too broad an opt-out, that's not some technical quibble. That's a flashing red alarm telling you you've fundamentally misunderstood what you're supposed to be doing. Then you had Ian Byrne, the Liverpool West Derby MP, straight up saying he couldn't support the legislation, with the government's amendments included. He even tabled several amendments of his own to try and fix what he saw as a catastrophic flaw in the bill. When your own MPs are publicly stating they'll vote against your flagship legislation, you know you've got a serious problem on your hands. This wasn't heading toward a minor embarrassment. This was shaping up to be a full-blown humiliation, the kind that gets replayed on news packages for years whenever someone wants to illustrate governmental incompetence. And let's talk about the timing here, because it's absolutely chaotic. MPs were supposed to debate the Hillsborough Law last week, but the discussion got pushed back until Monday to give the government time to propose changes that might address campaigners' concerns. So they had all that extra time, all those conversations, all that opportunity to get it right. And what did they produce? An amendment that made everyone even angrier than before. That's not missing the target. That's shooting in the completely wrong direction and somehow hitting yourself in the foot. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, went on the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, trying to do damage control. She insisted the security services wouldn't be exempt from the duty of candour, talked about the challenge of making sure the law applies without fear or favour, whilst letting the agencies do their jobs. Fair points, genuinely. The security services do handle confidential information. They do need some level of operational secrecy. Nobody's demanding that MI5 publishes its surveillance schedules on Instagram. But then Nandy said something really telling. She mentioned the Manchester Arena inquiry and how we can never end up in a situation where security services withhold information and present an inaccurate picture to families and public inquiries for a very long time. The sky does not fall in. You just do what your country needs you to do. Britain could do exactly the same thing with illegal immigration. We could turn the boats around. We could deport people who arrive illegally. We could enforce our own borders with the full force of the law. But we have a government that does not believe in that. We have a government that would rather post TikTok videos than actually take action. What is particularly galling about all of this is that it reveals something deeply unpleasant about the government. It reveals that they are completely out of ideas. A TikTok account is not a policy. It is an admission of defeat. It is a government that has given up and decided that social media stunts are an acceptable substitute for actual governance. It is a government that would rather be trendy than be effective. It is a government that would rather have good optics than good outcomes. And every time they do this, every time they announce some vapid initiative instead of taking real action, they chip away at what little credibility they have left. Let us think about what a serious government would do in this situation. A serious government would have a comprehensive immigration strategy. It would have naval enforcement working properly and consistently. It would have border controls that are actually effective at detecting and preventing illegal entry. It would have agreements with neighboring countries to prevent people from attempting the journey in the first place. It would have a proper prosecution strategy against human traffickers. It would have deportation procedures that actually work. It would have vetting procedures that ensure security. And it would have the political will to implement all of this, even when it is unpopular. But we do not have a serious government. We have a government that thinks posting TikTok videos is a viable immigration policy. We have a government that has completely lost sight of what governance actually means. We have a government that is more interested in being liked on social media than in actually protecting the country. And the irony is that Stamer probably genuinely thinks this makes him look modern and in touch. He probably thinks that by launching a government TikTok account, he is proving that Labour understands young people and the digital age. But what he is actually proving is that he understands nothing about solving real problems. Young people do not care about government TikTok accounts. Real people care about real solutions. They care about border security. They care about law and order. They care about their government actually doing its job instead of posting aesthetic content and hoping for viral engagement. This is what happens when you elect a government with no genuine ideology, no genuine policy platform, and no genuine commitment to actually serving the public interest. It falls back on gimmicks. It falls back on social media stunts. It falls back on theatre instead of substance. And it hopes nobody notices that the emperor has no clothes. The small boats crisis is real. It is serious. It demands serious solutions and serious action. Instead, the government posts dance videos, and that tells you absolutely everything you need to know about where this country is right now. It tells you that we have a government that has given up. It tells you that we have a government that does not believe in its own ability to solve problems. It tells you that we have a government that is more interested in likes and shares than in actually protecting British interests. It is woeful. It is spineless. It is pathetic. And it is exactly what you get when you elect a government that has no real conviction and no real plan. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more honest analysis of British politics.